begins, and I am back. Just a short update about where I've been, and just a little bit of the insight that I have more so clarity now on as a result of just going through the process of what I was talking about before I left off, just dealing with the conscious and the subconscious mind. And I don't know about anybody else, but as for me, I'm a person that has depth, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. It's just that I'm not a surface person, and I'm not shallow, and so as a result, I don't want to be just a talking head in a sea of other talking heads, just parroting and echoing information and theory that they don't really have any experience with, any fruit from, as a result of just being processed and it becoming a part of you. I mean, we're living in the information age with where anyone with Wi-Fi or internet connection and a smartphone can just sit in front of a camera and talk all day. And it's not to knock anybody, but as for me, I don't use it for vanity purpose or vanity's sake. And we can get information anywhere. It could be very factual information. It can in fact be good information, but at the end of the day, it's just information and theory. Do with it what you may will. But as for me, I'm one that I like to come from a place of experience, because these days we need true fruit. We need practical truth, something that can be implied in the rigors of life. Otherwise, what are we here for? I'm not here to talk good, sound eloquent, or any of those things. No knock against anybody else. But I said all of that to say that as a result, for me, it's like I'll wind up studying one thing, and it's kind of like the carrot at the entrance on the surface of the rabbit hole for me. It's like I'll start out studying and I'll try to condense it and get it simple enough to where I feel like I can present it. But it's really, unbeknownst to me, just the beginning of a rabbit hole, which takes me way beneath the surface, which is a good thing. I used to abhor it, but ultimately, it's what I signed up for, and it's the way that I'm wired. And so with that, just going deeper, of course, for a lot of times, that's the catalyst for a process. And the process is something that we as humans don't always like. We don't like process. We don't like anything that's painful. We don't like anything that's hard. We don't like anything that's rigorous. Ultimately, we are lazy at the core. If for no one else, me, and so if I can speak for no one else, I can definitely speak for myself. I don't always like it, and I don't always want to do the work equated that requires to get results, especially the way that we are conditioned into today's society. It's a microwave society, and we want results like yesterday, and I don't want to have to give up anything or very little for maximum results. But unfortunately, that kind of programming and wiring has set us up severely, and that's just not how it works. That's not the way that God intended for it to work. And so the thing is that in life, there are certain things that there is no way around. You have to face it, and you have to go through it. You have to deal with it head on. And we may try to fool ourselves of thinking that there are cheat codes and life hacks to get around certain things that God has ordained, but ultimately there's not. And it's just, ultimately it's a joke on us, because you're going to have to do it sooner or later, or you're going to have to deal with the circumstances of your decision not to. As far as a lot of people live and die in pain and misery and mediocrity as a result of bucking up against or kicking against the process, and just not really being able to deal with certain things head on, face on, or go through it, And so, it can take as long or it can take as short as we make it. And I'm not saying that we can entirely expedite the process, because we don't have control over that ultimately. But I believe our cooperation with it, as opposed to going against it, will definitely expedite it and accelerate it for us as much as possible. And so that's one thing that I'm learning. That all said all of that to say, just learning and dealing with my own mind. Sometimes you can feel like a prisoner of your own mind. I believe our minds are what we make it, depending on the amount of work that we do with it, because there's no way around it. In order to fully optimize and live our lives in this realm, you have to deal with the mind. You can't go around it. You can't go above it. You can't neglect it and expect for it to leverage it and work for you, or just feel like that you can just totally transcend the mind with and have no need for a use for it. And I believe that is one of the fallacies of the church, and not to pick on or beat up on the church, but they don't really equip you to adequately not deal with the mind as far as like a symptom, but how to leverage it, or they don't really deal with the whole reality of the mind. They make you feel like you can just throw faith over everything, or speak in tongues, or throw oil, or throw out a few cliche Bible verses, or sensationalism and emotionalism that doesn't work. And though you see the highest rate of defeat and depression and mediocrity comes from the church, because of that, as a fact, because there's no way around it. As for me, I feel like in going through my own process, I feel like that the mind, you're stuck in the prison of your own mind, because you notice how many limitations and how many the ceiling, and just you're just imprisoned by your own perspective, and you feel like that the opposition or circumstances or it's things that are outside of you, when the whole time it is all within. If our spirituality and unlearning and really knowing who God is, who we are, who Christ is, and all these things, and we find out that the kingdom of God truly is on the inside, as the Bible teaches, then if everything good and everything that we need for success in life is on the inside of us, then very well as well, any opposition or adversary to that would come from the inside of us as well. And that's not to discredit or say that this matrix or construct is conducive for true inside out spirituality, because it's not. But ultimately we have no excuses, because it's all about our perspective and the way that we perceive things, even things that may seem to be on the outside that are against us. Ultimately it's about us and what we do with our minds and what we do with God that's on the inside of us. There is no limitation, there's no circumstances, there is nothing on the outside of us that can truly limit us. The Bible said that greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. And so in dealing with the mind, it can feel like hell, because that requires us to slow down. It requires us to be still, be quiet, and it requires introspection to varying degrees. It means going on the inside of us, and the way that we tick, the way we have been made, the programs we have allowed, and things on the inside of us that we choose not to see, that we don't want to deal with, that we have suppressed, and just like an ostrich put our head in the sand, or like a kid scared of the dark, we put the blanket over our head in hopes that everything would go away. We just wish everything away, or we just enlist the help of our big bad daddy God in the sky to just do away with it once and for all, and we just live cushy, cotton candy and unicorn sweet lives, never having to deal with anything head on. And it simply doesn't it doesn't work like that. And the way that we have been conditioned and programmed to think that it does is one of the biggest things that has set us up for failure. And so it's at this point where a lot of people, 99% of us, this where we disassociate, and we only go so far, and then we want to numb ourselves out or distract ourselves from dealing with what's on the inside of us that eventually you have to deal with anyway at some point, and so we numb out and we disassociate, or we distract ourselves, whether that's with social media, which is like the number one thing, with Wi-Fi, internet, and smartphones everywhere. It's the most easiest and most convenient distraction, whether it be sex, whether it be self-sabotage in the form of overeating, drinking, vices, relationships, name it, you name it. We have a whole list and a whole conglomerate of excuses if we allow them to be, or distractions today to contend with, and it makes it convenient, and it kind of gives us a scapegoat, but not really. But it allows us to numb out, disassociate, and not deal with life. And it gives us an excuse because we feel like, well, the circumstances out there, or every time I try, something happens or it gets worse. And so it kind of gives us an excuse to numb out, and then we become stagnant and stuck at the level that we were. And eventually it gets worse, and you start to decline, and you start to move backwards. And so, in seeing that, even though it hurts like hell to deal with it, and a lot of times, like I said, it seems like the projection of the opposition is on the outside of us, but it's really on the inside, and it's the way that we have been wired and leveraged working against us, because we are created fearfully and wonderfully made. So the way that God has designed and made us, it is for our benefit. But the way that we have been programmed by society in this world, they leverage us against ourselves. And so our conscious mind is like the gatekeeper, and its objective is to protect, even at your own detriment. So even if something is bad for us, when we try to introduce something that's new, even though it's good and it's better, your mind fights against it because it wants to, if it sees it as an intruder or an invader. Think of it like like I said, a gatekeeper, or your security system. It wants to keep whatever on the outside that it perceives bad. It wants to keep that on the outside, and even if the programming on the inside, deep down in you, is good, or bad, it feels like it's good because it's there and it's familiar and it's been there, so it wants to keep that in. And so when we try to introduce a new thoughts, new belief system, upgrade former beliefs, or we try to set out for change, your mind fights against you because it perceives what you're doing as foreign. It's an invader. And so its job is to protect, as well as subconsciously the programs that we have that are on the inside. They begin to spring up as well because they are familiar. So it's like a fight of you versus you, and so it can feel like hell, a war within your own members, the Bible calls it, and it will stir up. It's like stirring up a hornet's nest, and so it seems like it's coming from the outside, but the whole time it's on the inside. And so to temporarily numb or to stop it, or that's where the disassociation and the numbing comes in, because it subsides, or it eases it for a moment. But the thing is, it ultimately hurts us, and it's to our detriment if we continue to succumb to it because it hurts, or it gets too hard, or it becomes unbearable. I totally get it. I found myself wanting to do all of the above, as far as numbing out, disassociating, or just going back to what was familiar. And we see the whole same pattern in Scripture. It was, as far as the disciples, when Jesus died, and they didn't have him physically on this plane with them anymore, and the persecution and the opposition became too much without the covering or protection that they perceived that they had before with having Jesus physically in the flesh. They didn't have that covering anymore, and so they retreated and they hid, or they went back to their lives prior to them meeting Jesus, whether it was fishing for Peter or whatever their profession or whatever their previous lifestyle was. They retreated as a result of the persecution becoming too intense and too unbearable. And so I get it. And one thing that has really was a catalyst for me in this whole process was I am going back and studying, not just reading, but studying through the parable of the sower. And Jesus said that this is the parable of all parables. And if you don't understand that parable, then you won't understand any parable. And so I believe that the key to our lives really is in that parable. And as a result of me studying through it and seeing where I am in relation to it, it has revealed a lot. And one of the, there were 4 scenarios of soil that was described, and 3 out of the 4, which is 75% of the soil, the seed didn't make it through. And one of those soils is said that the ground was shallow and didn't really have much root. And the King James says that because of persecutions arising, or affliction arising because of the word, the person, the soil, the person, the soil representing the person, they became offended and they backed off. But there's another interpretation of that same scripture and said when pressure arose because of the seed. And so those are the two scenarios we're working with. One says that afflictions and persecutions arose, which is more exoteric or it's outside. So it seems like, and that's how it seems when you're going through or you're trying to change. It feels like you're being persecuted and afflicted circumstantially, on the outside. But I believe that the second interpretation is the true interpretation, where it says that when pressure arose because of the word. And I'm not an agricultural guy or a gardener or a farmer by any stretch of the imagination, but I can only imagine that as you plant the seed and as the roots begin to grow deep and deeper beneath the surface, I can imagine it being uncomfortable because it has to break through soil, it has to break through rock, it has to break through different layers of things that stand in its path of it trying to stretch out and deepen its roots beneath the surface, just like the same as growing pains that we experience when we're going from adolescence to a teen to adulthood. Your body and your mind and your emotions and your hormones and everything is changing on the inside of you, and for a minute it becomes painful. And it's the same thing as in the spirit as it is in the natural. When we're experiencing growth, there are growing pains associated with that growth. And that's the part of the process that doesn't feel good and that we don't talk about because we don't want to deal with it. And as a result, our growth is stunted. And we stop at that point that we last were and begin to decline because we don't want to go through the process. And so I said all of that to say is that everything that we perceive to be on the outside and we want to ascribe it as evil because we don't like it, or we want to say it's the devil, and everything ain't the devil. As a matter of fact, 99% of the things that we ascribe is not the devil. It's just life. And if it's not, I'm not trying to say that there is no opposition, that there are not circumstances, and that we don't have things that oppose us, but ultimately it's on the inside of us and it's just for growth. And so instead of perceiving everything to be evil because it's uncomfortable, what really stood out to me is that the interpretation said that pressure arose because of the word. So how about, why can't we look at it as the new seeds that we are planting are causing discomfort within us because they're rooting out and bringing to the surface the things that are not conducive for our growth and for their growth? And why can't it be that it's making roots and they're going down deeper than we anticipated, so it makes us uncomfortable? And as a result, we don't like it, and so we stop it and we blame an outside force for our failures. This video is actually turning out to be longer than I anticipated, and I don't want to be long-winded. Plus, it's getting real good to me, so we'll just have this as the first video in an installment of however many there needs to be for me to get the message across. But I just wanted to provide a small glimpse into the process of what I'm going through in hopes that it will help someone else to know that you're not alone, that you're not crazy, that it's not just you, it's all of us. But I believe that it's that travail, it's those birth pains, it's those growing pains. That's Romans 8 talks about, as far as creation, growing and manifesting, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. So I believe that they're the birth pains. This is the travail. These are just growing pains. And don't fall back from the process. Don't get off the process, and don't just go through it. And it may seem a bit cliche and cheesy, but like they say, grow through it. Don't just go through it. And so this is the first installment. I'll be uploading more and detailing, going a little bit more into detail. But until then, I just want to say thanks for tuning in. Hope you got some value from this content, and peace.